What is up, Steeler fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Hangover. If you guys are watching this live, we are back to normal somewhat. It seems like we're normal. We got the music going. We got everybody here. Welcome back to the Hangover. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me, as always, Shannon White. Shannon, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. It's been a beautiful Monday, and just looking forward to tonight's show, and just glad to see you. And we've been texting, but it's good to talk to you and know that you're safe with everything going on out there in Texas.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, our thoughts and prayers go out to those families that are affected. I'm just about 40 minutes away from Kerrville. It's just up the street. I've been to the Guadalupe. I was just out at one of these rivers that flooded on Easter, and so it was. It's really close to home. Our thoughts and prayers to those that are affected in that horrible tragedy that's weather related, and hopefully everybody. I hope the victims' family members can mourn and find peace.
Yes, amen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, without further ado, let's break into today's conversation. The title of the show is that this team's going to be anything but boring this year. There's a lot of characters on the Pittsburgh Steelers when you look at everybody from the polarizing head coach and Mike Tomlin to the quarterback Aaron Rodgers. And now you got some guys that are new on defense like Jalen Ramsey, who, I'll be honest, there was just a report that was just dropped talking about one of the reasons or a few of the reasons why the Miami Dolphins shipped him out. A lot of it had to do with him being late to practices, him not trying, him defining the head coach and the defensive coordinator and doing things on his own. Kind of sounds a lot like George Pickens. Are you at all concerned?
I think with what we went through as Steeler fans for a while now, there's always reason to be concerned. I think there's reason for optimism. We don't know everything going on in the organization in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Ramsey is a Super Bowl champion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he knows what it takes to win. I don't like some of this behavior if it's true, but we've seen our own players try to force their way out the door with some of this similar type behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like he needed to change the scenery. Like I always said about George Pickens, I didn't say he wasn't any good. I said he wasn't mature, and he didn't need to be in Pittsburgh. He didn't fit the culture. He needed to go somewhere else, and he did. So, But when we was trying to come up with the title, I mean, I was just thinking about it. Begged and begged for the Steelers to try something different. But what they've done this offseason is totally out of character based on their history. And it's not boring. Are you not entertained? I mean, we have something to talk about and reason for some optimism.
Yeah, I agree. Culture or being bad against the culture and turning other teammates against the coaching staff were some of the things also that were said about Jalen Ramsey. I like that clip that he put out there, though, that he's ready to work. He wants to work. Maybe he sees the writing on the wall, kind of like Minka did back in 2019 when they were tanking for Tua out there in Miami, and he didn't want to be a part of that. Maybe that's something that Jalen Ramsey is seeing on the wall there in Miami, as it seems like they're getting rid of a lot of players out there. Do you think that trade was then more for Jalen Ramsey or more for Jonnu Smith? Who's more important out of that trade to you? You're on mute for some reason.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I coughed and I hit the mute button and then I forgot to turn it off. I'd be fined if I was on the pump your brakes. I'd have done got fined for that. But I think Ramsey is more important for the secondary to be able to play the more aggressive press coverage that I've been begging for forever, which I think could have a larger impact. On offense, Jonnu Smith hopefully will form a good connection with Aaron Rodgers and with the other pieces in place. Is Caleb Johnson and the kind of the Metcalf and the revamped receivers and hopefully the improved offensive line. I think he's going to be a component, a very valuable component. But I just think Ramsey's that missing piece to pair him with Porter and Slay to kind of give the Steelers that talent necessary to play press.
Yeah, I think you're right there. There's a lot of question of who's going to play slot, who's going to play nickel, and I think that with Jalen Ramsey, he's been able to play in those positions in the past, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they use him and utilize him in the manner that they were utilizing Mika Fitzpatrick, where they were using him in the slot as a safety, as a corner, and all over the place. And I think they're going to try to use Jalen in the same manner. I found a podcast that he had done. I think he was like 26 at the time, so it was like 4 years ago. And even at that time, he was talking about the longevity of his career and how he wanted to be an NFL football player for a while, and how he idolized Charles Woodson, who transitioned from cornerback to safety. And it's kind of sounds like he's willing to do that. He's a bigger cornerback. He seems like a guy that's not afraid to hit anybody. I think it would be a much different experience than what we saw with Patrick Peterson when they try to move him as a corner, as a safety, and he was really not having it when it came to trying to tackle some of these running backs. What do you think?
Yeah, Ramsey's, as you say, has been on record for years now that he knew this would eventually moving to safety would lengthen his career. He has great respect for Charles Woodson. It reminds me of our own Rod Woodson, guys who have made that switch. And Ramsey is definitely physical enough. His numbers are very comparable to Rod Woodson and Charles Woodson. So I think he will make the full-time switch, and I think that's part of the Steelers' plan. But this year, as we've talked before, I think you'll see him moved around.
Yeah, I definitely do think that as well. It'll be interesting, and as far as the other piece there, Jonnu Smith, my opinions on his contributions to this team, it appears to me that when you look at Arthur Smith's offense, a wide receiver 2 is a nice piece to have, but not necessarily needed. A lot of the times, the tight end position is that wide receiver 2 or gets the bulk of the second amount of receptions. And I think that's going to be the case here. I think that's why they brought in a Jonnu Smith. They have him to pair up with Pat Freiermuth, who I think are the two obvious pass catching tight ends on the team. I think the Steelers wanted to have another option there in case Pat goes down, because if Pat goes down, the rest of the guys that are there aren't really what you need as far as the prototypical tight end that's going to be able to go out there and catch and block. You have Darnell Washington, who's like a 6 offensive lineman. You have Connor Hayward, who is very small for a tight end and not the best blocker from what I've seen. So to me, you had to bring in another guy. I think he's going to fit that role. I think this means, though, that we need to expect at least 1,500 yards from the tight ends this year. If they don't get at least 1,500 yards this year, I think that it's we're probably in for a down year. What do you think?
That's a good number. However they get to it.
Yeah.
But I think amongst those tight ends, especially the top 3, I could see 1,500 and maybe 8 to 10 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Because you want to be putting points on the board, and Metcalf's going to be your primary receiver, obviously. But everything I'm hearing about Roman Wilson is positive. It's been, we know that he closed out minicamp on a bad day, a low day, which happens. But now he's got to wait 6 weeks to, get that out of the bad taste out of his mouth and get back on the field and start showing everybody what he can do. But if he's healthy, I fully expect him to contribute this year and maybe shock some people, because in his senior year at Michigan, he was a really good player.
Yeah, very good, very fast, a lot bigger than I thought he was. I don't know if you saw this recent, I guess it was a social media picture that was going around with Aaron Rodgers and majority of the wide receiver crew out there in his Malibu. Yeah. I was like, who's that little, is that a child? And then it was Calvin Austin. He was in the middle there. much shorter than everybody else. I thought Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson were almost the same height. They're not. Roman Wilson is quite a bit taller than him.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. What do you think about that? First and foremost, Aaron Rodgers bringing out the wide receiver crew out to Malibu to practice.
Well, I think, most of your veteran guys try to do that in some form or fashion as they're warming up for, because as we've said before, as you get older, you don't just snap back into shape in a week or two of camp. You got to stay in shape. And so somebody that's 41, Rodgers is going to want to get in a limited amount of throws. He don't want to put too much strain on the old wing there. But if he can get them guys out there and start to develop rhythm with him, because some guys come out of the break and they get to full speed faster than others. And, that's something the quarterback kind of got to know. And you don't want to try to figure it out weeks 1, 2, or 3 of the season. So I think it shows that Rodgers is invested for this maybe being his last year. And, I've heard people say the Steelers really didn't go all in. Well, I think they did go all in, but they did it without mortgaging the future. Because with all these 1-year contracts and guys that's going to be coming off their existing contracts, they could have another big change on the roster going into next year, especially if you bring in, a high draft pick as your next franchise quarterback potentially. So I like how they set it up this year, even better than I did last year.
Yeah, I agree. At this point, I am excited. The only part that really kind of got me a little low was when the Steelers traded George Pickens. When that happened, I had already had this vision of George on one side, DK on the other, Aaron Rodgers just slinging it around, and that went down the tubes pretty quick. But I'm getting back excited about this team. Hearing about the offensive line and their movement and how they were able to move in minicamp and OTAs, and also seeing these guys out there and knowing that the Steelers got a dog as a wide receiver in DK Metcalf. And not saying that George Pickens wasn't that, but George Pickens was too selfish. It was more about him than anybody else. And in some moments he was able to do some great things, but overall he became a little bit of a cancer to the team. And they got rid of him for a reason. But I'm excited again. I think that the team is doing the right stuff. They're making some moves. A lot of people were looking at this and saying, hey, Omar Khan's getting a little desperate. Is he on the hot seat? The Steelers say no and give him a 3-year extension. How do you feel about that? How do you like the extension and it being public and known out there? Is that to tell the masses that he's here to stay?
No, I think the timing right after the trade and everything spoke volumes.
Yeah.
That for the Steelers, the Rooneys, ownership, everybody to show they're on the same page. And I think Omar Khan's done an excellent job. When you come in and somebody hasn't been up to snuff doing their job, it takes a while to fix the mistakes. And before you can even start to try to, rebuild the thing. So I think he's had 3 strong drafts in a row. I love Weidl. Andy Weidl is a huge part. As Khan knows his craft. He knows his job. He's a money guy. And I think he works well with the players. The players like him. But I think Andy Weidl is a very strong talent evaluator. I'm not saying Khan isn't, but I think that he's leaning on Weidl, and Weidl's experience, connections around the league, his experience as a draft evaluator. Weidl is very, very valuable, and I'd like to see him hang on to him as long as they can. He knows the blueprint in Philadelphia. He helped establish it.
Yeah, 100%. The fact that the Steelers have attacked the offense and defensive line in the first round of the last 3 drafts something that they hadn't done. Tackle wasn't even addressed ever in Kevin Colbert's tenure as the GM. I think the last time the Steelers drafted a defensive lineman in the first round was probably Cam Hayward, I think was the last one before Derek Carmen. I could be wrong about that. I think there was bugs or something like that in the between there. But the offensive line, the tackle, the defensive line, addressing the trenches, that's been something that has followed Andy Weidel. I think that you're absolutely right. The way that the Steelers are being built now, I think is is kind of following that footprint.
Mhm.
And, when it comes to Omar Khan, I think that one of the reasons why you give him a 3-year extension is because you have full intention on drafting a quarterback next year. And now this quarterback is going to make or break Omar Khan, but how long are we going to know before this quarterback was good? Now, I know that Kenny Pickett only had like 2 years and he was shipped out, but in reality, with Kenny, he had a different of general managers changed and things like that. And I think there was a little bit of an issue with what happened in Seattle with him not wanting to dress that kind of caused him moving on from the team. And even at that, I think it was him asking for a trade as well. So that's one aspect of it. But in reality, if the Steelers are going to go out there and draft a quarterback high in the first round, I know how the Steelers are. I don't see them starting that quarterback next year, at least not week 1. Maybe sometime in the middle. So, if he starts in the middle, or if, let's just say, Aaron Rodgers balls out this year, we get number 7, he decides he wants to come back. Now you have him sitting behind Rodgers, for a year, and then he has a full second year. And that's going to be his full year as a starting quarterback. And there's a lot of growth that has to be done there. It's not until they're probably the end of their second full year where you have an understanding of the trajectory of the quarterback and whether or not that was a solid pickup by the general manager if they did their job. So I'm thinking that has a lot to do with why they gave him a 3-year extension.
Oh, yeah. If you're going to, at this stage of a rebuilding process, and you feel positive about it, you want to have that guy going to be around for at least 3 years. So I think it was a very wise decision by the Steelers. The best laid plans of mice and men. Ben was not supposed to start his rookie year.
That's true.
Maddox is coming off some decent seasons, and Ben was going to learn behind him, and injury, and next thing you know, it was history. So, that might be the plan going into next year. I totally agree. But especially with an older quarterback, if it was Rodgers, that can change like that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after just a few words from our sponsors. We'll be right back. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Before we get back into the conversation, I want to remind you guys of our website, stillcurrentnetwork.com, your one-stop shop for Pittsburgh Steelers news and coverage. When you're done listening to this, go check out the website. Go look at the audio-only podcasts. There's plenty of them there that you're not catching if all you're doing is watching Still Current Network on YouTube. That includes mine that airs out on Saturday called State of the Steelers. It's on the Still Current Network. State of the Steelers airs out on Saturdays around 11 a.m. You won't be disappointed. Please go over there, check it out, and you guys know what to do. So, in efforts to not be, I guess, boring, as the title goes, did you hear or see some of the statements made by Hall of Famer and former Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw earlier this week?
I heard about some of them. I didn't. I read about it like on Twitter and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure exactly which ones. He talked a good bit.
Yeah, he did. He talked first and foremost. He talked about how the Steelers may have did Kenny Pickett wrong. He talks about how they only gave him a year and a half, and they didn't put anybody around him, which I don't think is completely true. He didn't have an offensive line, which I admit that's probably true at that time. especially his rookie year. I think they were still working with Kendrick Green, right, in
Yeah.
2022. So I understand that. Um, but to me, I think when it just to briefly talk about Kenny, I think there's more than just what he was able to do and not able to do on the field. I think that whole situation that occurred in Seattle where he didn't want to dress, and then at the end of the year, asked for a trade. I think that if he didn't ask for a trade, even with what happened in Seattle, I think he has an opportunity to play last year. But it's on his own doing, in my opinion. I feel nothing, or I don't feel bad for him at all, or his situation. He did it to himself.
I think the biggest um, shortcoming or where they let everybody down, not just Kenny Pickett,
Hmm.
was Matt Canada. And I'll go to my grave saying
Mm.
that's the worst offensive coordinator I have ever seen at the NFL level, bar none. I don't remember anybody that clueless. And he hurt the Steelers greatly. Now, he wasn't the reason they drafted poorly and, made some, decisions they made. But
Mm.
hiring him, why they done that, I will never know. That made absolutely no sense. That was people talk about desperation. This move feels like, a desperate move.
Mm.
And the Steelers usually do not do that. But that move did. I think now going into this next year, we're going to see with the Aaron Rodgers being there, Goodler will staying relatively healthy. If the offensive line takes the next step forward like we expect, and more weapons, I expect this offense and the defense with Ramsey and hopefully being able to play more modern NFL coverages. I think you're going to see what we expect to see is improvement. If not, there's got to be coaching changes. Now, I ain't saying necessarily Tomlin, but there's got to be some coaching changes with the coordinators and positional coaches. So this is a big prove-it year for a lot of people, and they ain't all players.
But well, here's the thing, though. I mean, there's been coaching changes already. Offensive coordinators have come and go, and it hasn't been since Todd Haley that the Steelers have had a competent offensive coordinator that you know put out on the field an offense that we could be proud of. Randy Fichtner wasn't impressive. Matt Canada has not been impressive. Last year, Arthur Smith has had his ups and downs. Now we blame the quarterback position. You had one quarterback who couldn't see over the middle of the field, another quarterback who maybe couldn't read the defenses very well. But at the same time, uh, I think the best offense was, well, last year was when Russell Wilson kind of lit it up against the Bengals. And according to some reports out there, he was going against what the offensive coordinator wanted him. And that's when they started to bump heads. So I don't know. I mean, to me, I think it's about time you start looking at that head coach if it doesn't work out this year.
Like I said, I'm not saying for sure if it's, what would have to happen for us to say, okay, looking at everything I'm looking at, Tomlin's the problem. But I think it's a combination of things. I think it's coordinators who, one, are not creative enough and not talented enough to come up with innovative game plans on either side of the football. Part of that problem, though, is because your head coach is saying, keep it close, play it close to the vest, very conservative. Don't turn the ball over, don't give up big passing plays, and we can win.
Hmm.
You're playing to win by this kind of margin, by the skin of your teeth. Tomlin's comfortable with that. I hate it myself. Absolutely hate it.
Mm-hmm.
You go out and you get an offensive line coach that doesn't even fit your offensive personnel. You bring in an offensive coordinator that's a throwback. He's an old school, old-timey style of offensive coordinator, not the modern guy.
Hmm.
You don't hear anybody say Arthur Smith is like the modern revolution of NFL offense. No, he's a throwback because Tomlin likes that. Again, all this is Tomlin guys, Tomlin hires, and something's got to give after this season, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they'll do anything. I don't think Tomlin's seat at this point will ever get warm. especially if they're anticipating on going at it again with another first round quarterback. Now, if this first round quarterback don't work out next year, I think at that point all the pressure and everything falls squarely on Mike Tomlin. He's had multiple quarterbacks, many of them that are destined to the Hall of Fame, and Ben, possibly Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers now. He's had Kenny Pickett as a first round quarterback. Possibly he's getting another first round quarterback next year. If he can't develop that quarterback, I mean, I'm already ready to a certain extent to see a new face there. I think I've been ready for that for a couple of years. I have not liked the direction that the team has gone in. It's been very conservative, as you mentioned. It has been don't lose the game instead of going out there and win the game. And, it's gotten to the point where the offense has just been so poor that it's affected the rest of the team. The defense can't get off the field. They get tired, they get injured. And it's been mediocre at best. And the Steelers have been stuck in this limbo of area of just of middleness, of mediocrity. And I think it's time for a change if they don't do it. Now, if the Steelers go out there and they win a playoff game and whatnot, I think that buys him obviously some more time with the fans. I think that he's going to have as much time as he wants with the Roonies, but with the fans before they start, the fire Mike Tomlin chance, if they have a successful year this year. But even if they do, if he drafts a quarterback next year and he busts out, it's going to fall on him, in my opinion. You're on mute again.
Excuse me. As we've said before, Tomlin's never had to develop a quarterback.
Yeah.
And all these guys, like you said, future Hall of Famers, if he don't trust them to open this offense up and give them some freedoms, how's he ever going to trust a rookie? And we know there's some coaches that are just more adept from their personality, everything about them is as a teacher, a nurturer. Andy Reid is great with quarterbacks. Some guys are quarterback gurus, and they just develop this closeness, a bond with these guys, and they give them confidence. See, there's no way to measure confidence. When we look at statistics or we look at the numbers from the combine, the workouts, and you can't measure confidence, and you can't measure the importance of momentum. And I think there's times every year that the Steelers have an opportunity to establish momentum, to start building something. And it always gets cut off because they insist on the conservative approach. And the players know if you don't have faith in them. If I'm telling you, oh, yeah, I trust you, now go out there and we're going to drive, but you don't get over 30 mile an hour, I'm going to be sitting over here, ready to take over. How much do you really trust me?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And it's been one of those situations where it's been so confusing, because I've heard some of the stories where he's told like Doug Hodges to let him hang before he goes out there and just go to the wall, and put it all out there. And then it's just been going from that competitive edge, a team that's wanting to put 30 plus points on the board and knock teams out early, to what we see today is just 9-day difference. I mean, it seems to me like a man who has found living in his fears comfortable. And, to me, for him to say that they don't live in their fears so often, and I don't know, but this year they're changing things up. They've changed it up. They've gone out there and completely, they got a whole new quarterback room and did some things that we haven't thought we would see. They traded for DK Metcalf, gave up a second rounder. They have 12 picks in this upcoming draft. It sounds like they're starting to do things a little bit differently, value those picks a little bit differently, maybe perhaps in efforts to position them better to pick up better players in the draft. So, one of the things that Tomlin did say is if they keep doing the same thing, that's the definition of insanity, and they're not going to do the same thing. And to a certain extent, it does seem like they're doing that this year, don't you think?
Yeah, they've made so many changes, and I'm like I said, I'm really pleased with it. I'm proud of them.
Yeah.
It's it's refreshing. I'm ready for the season now. I'm ready to be excited because we don't know. We really don't. I can kind of predict the last few years what the offense is going to look like, how conservative it's going to be, how passive they was going to play on defense, and wait on the superstar to make a big play. And if they wasn't able to make the big play, the Steelers would end up losing a close game at the end. It just happened all the time. When they played a good team, even if the superstars made a play or two, they still lose pretty handily because they just, got wore down. The other team was being aggressive, playing to win, and Steelers were playing to not lose. There's a difference. But this year, we don't know what to expect. I have hope that the offense will open up, that they will trust the Rodgers to make the right decisions. I believe that the offensive line is going to improve and be able to open holes and get a push in the running game and protect the quarterback finally, without Dan Moore leading the league in sacks allowed again. I have a hope that they have offensive weapons now that can make some plays, and a quarterback can find them if they get open. So, but my biggest concern is they've had the highest paid defense. They still do. But they have had the highest paid defense for a while, but they haven't trusted them to, they play conservative and passive there.
Yeah.
That's my biggest concern. I mean, I understand if you give up a big play, you get behind, it's hard for that offense to catch up. But my gosh, if you ain't going to have faith in the highest paid defense in the NFL, either you're incapable of being creative enough to utilize them correctly, or you're wasting a lot of money.
Well, yeah, but to me, it all boils down to being a coaching problem. I mean, last year, the Steelers on first drives of their first drive of the game, they scored less touchdowns than the opposing defense on those same drives.
Yes.
I mean, that is the part of the game that your offensive coordinator plans out. Those are the scripted plays because this is what they're anticipating on seeing from the defense. This is what they're anticipating the defense's weaknesses are, their strengths. They're going to go away from those things. And yet the Steelers were unable to put up a touchdown last year and allowed the defense to have a pick six. And so they had less touchdowns than the defenses that they played against on their first drive. That is piss poor. I mean, that is just really poor. And at the end of the day, to me, that falls on the coaching. That falls on preparation, and that falls on knowing your opponent. And that needs to change. That needs to change because this is not just an Arthur Smith thing. Steelers starting off slow have been a situation for a while now.
I've watched some old games and stuff. Missing football, being the off season, and I'll see a game and there'll be a drop pass here or a special teams mishap there, and I don't remember those because back then it wasn't that big a deal. Because they would still, it could be 3rd and 18, and Ben and Bell and Brown, they come up with a play, or even before them, even during the Neil O'Donnell area, or shoot, back with Bradshaw, it didn't matter if it's 4th and 20, he's throwing deep anyway. So, but it's got to the point now that when they've made a mistake, like 1 or 2 in a game, you remember them at the end of the year. Last year, I'll never forget when they had the 4th down and they went with the fake punt and they threw it out there to James Pierre. All he had to do was catch the ball. He might have scored. It was him in the punt return. That's all he got to get a tackle him. And he dropped it. That was a great call. It worked perfectly. Everything but the player catching the football.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is we're seeing special teams improve last year, didn't we? Punting was much better. They got the best kicker in football. Coverage teams were great. And even when they went for some fakes and stuff, they worked. But we're not seeing that same creativity on offense. When they have tried to do a play that you might call a trick play or something, it's called at the worst possible time.
That's true.
And it seems that it's always blows up. It's a disaster every time because they're so conservative that when they do something out of the ordinary, everybody's looking for it.
Yeah.
It's painfully obvious. Something's different, right? Like if only time you bring Calvin Austin out there is when you're going to do a jet sweep or a reverse or, he loses his effectiveness. They say he's out there. We got to focus on him. You got to have this in part of your regular offense. And that's where their lack of creativity and aggressiveness hurts them.
I think that a big component to why some of these drop passes and things have happened and they stick out for us for so much is because of the lack of opportunities. So the Steelers, when they throw the ball, is run, pass. And so if they drop it, the drive is over.
Yeah.
Drive's done. And so that's why it is so important that on the limited opportunities that they had to throw the ball and be aggressive or do those things, that they had to maximize on those opportunities. And if they didn't, because they weren't, I think last year they were doing a lot more of the moon balls because that was the only thing that Russ was really, really good at. But, before that, it was really short stuff. And even with Russ, it became, home run or handoff basically. And, it becomes predictable for one. And two, you have to maximize on those opportunities because there's so few and far in between that you're going to be able to do something with it. If you don't, it turns into a long, long day for the team and for the fans watching it.
Another thing that you'll notice is when they run their routes, any of our receivers, you can run rub routes. You got to be crafty enough to pull them off.
Yeah.
But you can just run them where you don't even touch anybody, but you cross, and it causes guys to take a half step or step to the side a little bit, and you can work a guy open. The Steelers are really, really bad at that. And when they do try it, they make it so obvious. Half the time it looks like one of the guys is throwing a block, and they almost always get caught.
Yeah.
So there's little things that I worry. Is this just a lack of, because I think the guys are as smart as any other team in the league. I think the players are. I don't think there's a lack of intelligence and they can't learn this stuff. I just don't think they're being taught this stuff. The finer points of the game.
Yeah.
How to be crafty and get away with something and not make it so obvious. Like hopefully Porter's going to learn a lot from Ramsey and Slay on the intricacies of a little jersey tug, a little, grab the wrist a little bit, whatever, to stay up with the guy, slow him down a little bit, throw him off his route. There's ways to do it, and you don't have to get flagged every time. But Porter, panics. The ball's in there, the spotlight's on him and the receiver, and then he grabs. And that'll get you every time.
But isn't that kind of like the wrong approach? In my opinion, it's kind of the wrong approach to have the older guys teach the younger guys. Why not extend your coaching staff? Get somebody that was at one point an excellent cornerback or defensive back and have them teach them the finer points and work with them more on a one-on-one situation. That way it's not taken away from what Jalen or Darius Slayer's doing. Because again, their job description isn't to train the younger guys and obviously give them pointers and tips and things of that nature. But I think you can get those fine-tuned intricacies done if you expand your coaching staff and bring in a guy that's going to be doing that, working with the young guys. I mean, I think even Mason Rudolph said he didn't have a quarterback coach for the first 2 years he was trying. They were trying to make Ben be his quarterback coach, and Ben didn't want nothing to do with him.
Yeah, I think when you have the smallest staff in the NFL, there's only so much time in a day. We know that you can't practice as long as you used to. You can't practice as often as you used to. You can't be as physical as you used to be, and even in practice. There's all these rules and everything. So you have to maximize your time together to teach. And now you got the smallest coaching staff in the NFL. I agree with you. But some of these things, like the little intricacies, I can't say it very good. Ways to cheat. Let's put it that way. Older guys usually teach that better because they've learned the tricks of the trade, so to speak, through the years. But a lot of the just regular fundamentals, I think the Steelers have been lacking. And I believe it again is because, as you say, they need, actual coaches to teach this stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. At the end of the day, I think Tomlin maybe got used to having such a veteran team that knew the ropes. I mean, when he acquired the Pittsburgh Steelers as the head coach in 2007, it was already a very veteran team. They had guys that were already bought into what the Pittsburgh Steelers were and the Pittsburgh Steelers way, so to speak. And those guys instilled the younger guys. And I think Tomlin is wanting the younger guys to do that, or that are now older, but it doesn't always work out that way, especially if the culture is not coming from the top, so to speak. And so, I think this is another situation where he had a very veteran team early on in his year in his coaching career. Not so much here recently. It's been very young, and it's been a lot of attitude, a lot of selfishness on the team, a lot of me first, whether it's the TikTokers or the rappers or the guys that want to cause issues off the field or whatever the case may be. That's been kind of prevalent for a while now, ever since some of these older veteran guys have left the team that were there when Tomlin started. Maybe that's what he's trying to recapture by getting all these old guys on this team now.
I think we're seeing that across football, from high school to college to the pros. It's a different game now. And every so often it changes. And we'll say the game passes somebody by. It used to be you was proud of your franchise, your city. You played for the fans. You played for, you didn't go out for drinks with the guys from another team after the game. They had to keep Lloyd from fighting guys. Greg Lloyd wanted to fight guys after the game. He didn't shake hands. He just left the field, especially if they lost.
Yeah.
He wasn't worried about making friends. But now you might be playing on that team next year. You might be a free agent. You might get traded. So there's so much player movement. There's not that respect. You're like, well, I'm not having a good year this year, but I can change that all next year if I go somewhere else. So I think we're Tomlin come up during the time, and he was on Tony Dungy's staff.
Yeah.
A man of respect, a man of faith, an excellent coach. And Tomlin did a great job in a couple of positions. And, at the last, there's a defensive coordinator. So he comes to Pittsburgh, and as you say, he inherits a veteran squad with a culture and guys who did it the right way and wanted to play for the name on the front of the jersey more than the name on the back. And so through the latter part of his career now, that's not been the case. And he's done a great job of keeping a lot of things under wrap and out of the public eye, like AB, as we know.
Yeah.
How he did that, I don't know. But he did. And so we had no clue what was going on behind the scenes. Now you see the craziness, but we didn't back then. So I give him credit for that. I give him credit for his relationship with the players and that he shoots these guys straight and he's respected. And I think the biggest weakness, we've talked many times about time management. We know that's an issue. Player personnel usage, that's another issue. And the last one is, again, we've talked about it tonight, is that conservative mindset that if I can just keep these guys from making a huge mistake on either side of the ball, at the end, we can pull this out because I can outcoach that other guy. You're seeing that in college. Some of the old coaches are stepping away because, one, the young people are different. When they're not just thrilled, hey, I'm at Auburn or I'm at Alabama or I'm at, LSU or Ohio State. Now it's, well, if I don't like it, you ain't give me what I want money-wise or playing time, I'll go, I'll transfer. I'll go in the portal. Yeah. So it's hard to develop somebody when you don't even, you've got to do everything on a 1-year basis, right?
Yeah.
Well, the NFL's like that if you really think about it, because a lot of guys got 1 year contracts. They're on the last year of their contract, or you know, not only they might not be around, you might not be around. The way teams go through coaches now.
Yeah.
The difference in Tomlin, which is why I wish he would be more aggressive and more confident in his players, is that he has job security like nobody ever.
Yeah, he does. He definitely does. And, the culture has not been the same. Remember when Ben got knocked down and nobody picked him up? I mean,
Exactly.
that's been what it's been for a while now. I think that they've put in some new guys, and I think that they've got some high character guys to come in on this team and try to change some of those things around, especially some of the younger guys. I know there's been some question marks with some of the older guys that they brought in, like we talked about Jalen Ramsey at the top of the show, and some of the concerns that were going on out there in Miami that led to him being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think that the coaching staff in Miami is a little bit different. I think Tomlin is going to be able to, as you say, he was able to, with like AB and stuff, kind of keep it under control. I think he'll be able to keep Jalen Ramsey under control as well. I just hope that, the Steelers they're gonna have to start off fast, man, because winning cures all. And if you lose, then it starts the blaming game. And this team has some characters that if they lose and blame starts to get thrown around, it can go sour real quick. So, I'm hoping that they start off strong, and maybe them putting Derek Harmon as a starter is one reason of that, saying, hey, we need to get these guys their chemistry together right away. Let's make him a starter. Let's not hold off on that. Let's put him in the starting lineup. Let him build that camaraderie. Let him build that chemistry. To me, I honestly think that this year so far, outside of them getting wide receiver number 2 yet, seems very different than the last couple of seasons.
I mean, I'm still think it can happen. If they get the right offer, even into the early parts of training camp, I think they'll try to pick up somebody to develop and maybe have as a future wide receiver too. Maybe not a big contributor this year.
Yeah.
If depending on who gets cut at the end of camps. So, but I'm less worried about wide receiver 2 now than I was before because of how I think they're going to use Jonnu Smith. How I think we'll see a lot of 12 personnel and even 13 personnel. And because Metcalf's going to be out there, guys. But the other receivers are going to have to earn that playing time. Because the Steelers legitimately go 3 deep at tight end. They're deeper at tight end than they are receiver.
That's true. That is true. That's the only part that I think maybe perhaps concerns some of the fan base, including myself, is we want to have a high-powered offense, and I'm not necessarily certain 3 tight end sets is equal to high-powered offense. You usually don't put those two in the same realm, right? I mean, you usually think, all right, 3 tight end sets, you're trying to close out a game, you're trying to run it down somebody's throat. I hope it's not that case. I hope these guys are pass catchers, so I hope they utilize them in that manner.
It sounds like Darnell Washington is ready to take his game to the next level, especially as a receiver. That with an accurate quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, if he can get the ball out on time, hit them in stride, these guys can move. They can put some. To me, an explosive offense doesn't mean you got to have Tyreek Hill, because they was explosive moments in last year, especially under Russell Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
They was explosive plays, as you say, the moon ball. So that's what Russell Wilson's good at. But it would just fizzle out.
Yeah,
and so I would be more happy myself with sustained drives, time of possession, grind it out, score a touchdown. I don't care if it's a 1 yard tush push. Just get them all in the end zone, get the lead, set that defense loose, that pass rush loose, play the press coverage. This old boy will be happy. Because when you have bad weather games, that deep passing game usually goes away.
Yeah.
Which real windy, it's hard to throw deep balls in the wind.
Yeah.
And in the playoffs, everybody plays tighter. You're playing tougher teams, and you need to be able to have ball possession, time of possession, and be able to out bully other teams. And I'm hoping the Steelers are on the verge of doing that now.
Yeah, I hope so too. I definitely do. I think that they do got some pieces. I know somebody says Calvin Austin. John says Calvin Austin's going to take it off the top. Man, I wouldn't be surprised if they put Calvin Austin behind. They try to hide him behind those tight ends. And
you
let
won't
him run.
see. He's tiny. Yeah.
He's very small. Get all those tight ends in front of him. Let him block. Let him run down the field. That good luck finding him. Good luck finding him. Overall, in the end, I think that this is it's the dead part of the year. There's not much to talk about, and we're waiting for the next shoe to drop, and until it does, we're going to be. I guess you're talking about the same stuff. Do you expect anything to happen, or do you think that's it until training camp?
I'm not seeing anything on the horizon immediately because usually you'll hear like little rumors or some guys that have kind of insider knowledge for some of these other teams. I'll try to pay attention, and they'll say, "Man, at the minicamp, this guy rookie really showed, and he might make this guy or this guy expendable."
Yeah.
You can almost always see it. And then, a few weeks, a month later, that guy's name hits a trade block. But I'm not hearing anything. So it might go to camp and nothing else.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the next few, shoes that drop, if any drop, there's a good possibility that nothing else happens. I think the only thing that could happen between now and training camp is maybe a TJ Watt signing. But even at that, I think that's gonna take some time. It doesn't sound like they're close. It sounds like they're,
it don't sound good.
Yeah, it don't sound great. It sounds like the Steelers are confident that something's going to get done, but it don't sound like they're close yet.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. There's really not an easy answer. I still think it's going to get done, but last time, Watt just had to tell his agent, "Hey, I'm done with this," and he went in and sat down with ownership and got it done. So, we'll just have to see. It's kind of the ball's in his court, I think.
Do you think he shows up to training camp without a contract?
Yeah, I think he'll do like he did last time. I think he'll show up, but it'll be like a sit-in, whatever they call that, where you show up but you don't practice.
Yeah, I'll be relieved that happens.
Yeah, I will be, because to me that shows he's really wanting to be there.
Yeah.
Now, if he don't show up at all, then I think it's gotten personal. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be the next thing to look out for, guys. Is number 90 out on at least on the stretching on the side of the field out there when it comes when the Steelers report to Latrobe? Is he going to report there? We got a little bit of ways to go. A couple more. When does it start? Like 2-3 weeks?
Is it the 27th?
I think so.
It's usually the 26th, 27th, right there.
Somewhere there at the end of this month. Yeah. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. Bear with us. We're not going nowhere, though. We're going to still talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and any news and coverage that comes out of it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell, guys. Shannon, do you have any final words for everybody?
No, I just want to say that we appreciate everybody in the comments, our community for all our podcasts. And I know sometimes we all get frustrated, and one of the hardest things to do is, when we think, well, this person doesn't fan the same way I do. And it's easy to take things personal, but we all see things from a different lens sometimes. But we all, in the end, we got to remember we're all Steeler fans, and let's just support each other, and look forward to this upcoming season, guys. I mean, that's the whole point of the show tonight, was it's not going to be boring. And the offense has been so predictable and so inept and so boring for the last few years. I'm just excited to potentially have something different.
Me too. Me too. Even if it's just average on offense. If they go out there and they put up 25 points a game, 26 points a game, they know that's not the top tier. That's maybe like top 12 or so.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with that. I would be ecstatic. Well, guys, tomorrow night on Steel Curtain Network, you have Big Brosco Show. And then Wednesday, Pump Your Brakes. Don't forget Friday night or Saturday at around 11 a.m. It's on the audio only side. You catch State of the Steelers, my podcast. It's audio only Saturday at 11 a.m. Shannon, take us out, my man.